Okay, some of you have found me. Hold on. I'm going to wait for a few people to catch up. Almost there. What a pain in the butt. Okay. Okay, well, some of you have found your way, about half of you. So we'll get started. Sorry about this delay. I can't do anything about this. This is the third time it's happened. It's just a gift from YouTube. So, welcome to Coffee Time Live. I've been doing the coffee times for about 2 years. Been doing them live for just under a year. I do them every Sunday, 11 o'clock local time. Currently, it's Eastern Standard Time in the United States. That changes 6 months of the year. So I want to thank all the contributors. I'm way down so far this year for the past 3 months, so it's slowing my travel plans. But outside of that, life is good. Everything's fine. I've been getting a ton of comments, so I appreciate that. I try to get to everyone. I miss them once in a while. Today, it's 73 degrees. We've got a high of 77 coming up. It's a little cloudy, kind of perfect weather. We had that week of heat wave where it got up to 86. But after that week, it's been running the 70s. It's pretty beautiful, really. So, the purpose of these Coffee Time Lives is so that we can interact, so that you can ask questions, and basically it's the closest we can get to having a conversation with a whole group of people. And a lot of you interact with each other. That's great. You're creating this little community, and that's a good thing. And I've been seeing probably 1 or 2 people a week come through. They watch the videos and they just decide to, take a little side trip from Medellin and check the place out. I don't necessarily care. I don't want to see a big expat influx here. It's not my goal. Somebody mentioned, you're doing a good job promoting. I'm not trying to promote. I could care less where you end up, to be honest. And it's got nothing to do with you, or it's just, I'm not here for that. And if it sounds like things are like kind of flowery, it's just an expression of the way I feel. So today, what's our topic today? Well, let's see, it's pot, weed, grass, 420, ganja, reefer, bud, Mary Jane, blaze, boo, burrito, Texas tea, and mota. Yeah, we're going to talk about weed today. This is what brought it on. Well, first of all, my history. Do I smoke weed? No, I don't smoke weed. Somebody asked, do I care if people smoke weed? No, not really. I don't care. I smoked pot for about 15 years. I'm a slow learner. It took me a long time to realize the negative effects that it had on my life. For 15 years, I mean, it's like, yeah, I liked it. There were a lot of positive aspects to it, but there are also some negative aspects, and I became much more energetic and focused after I quit smoking weed. And that little bit of an edge was kind of nice if you're trying to compete in the world. But, that's me. I think the only downside that I see is people that are smoking pot from a young age, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, before their brains developed. You're seeing a rash of inability to handle emotions. You're seeing a ton of issues. Bipolar has exploded uh, as a disease or a symptom. It's directly related to smoking weed at a young age. Now you get 18, 19, 20, 21 as your brain develops, then any effects are really short term, and you'll be fine from there. So, I don't really have a lot of personal judgment on it. I get why people want to smoke weed. Now, why did I get to this topic today? Well, first of all, I had a friend come visit me. And, she and I were just, talking about one thing. Well, I was telling her about a couple trips that I'm trying to plan out soon. And she volunteered to help me on one. I may or may not take her up on it. But just before she left, she dropped this little tiny plastic baggie, little Ziploc. It was no more. I mean, it's not even an inch square. It was less than that. And inside it had this little bud. And at first, what is that? I opened it up and smelled it, and it was like full of resin, had that really good smell to it. And I said, "Hey, you dropped something." And I said, "Before you go, can I ask you some questions? Because if you're a friend of mine here and you're a local person, it was the same in Ecuador, I'm going to ask you, you're getting grilled. I ask every topic I can think of, and I really push for information. Now, I've never addressed, in the 4 years I've been doing these videos, I've never talked about weed. And so here's my chance, So she said yeah. So she sat back down and we started talking about it. We had a nice conversation about it. Item number 2 is my gringo neighbor who lives a floor below me, and I can actually see his balcony from here, and I can see the couple pot plants he's got growing. And I went down one day, probably a month ago, for a coffee with him. We do that every so often. And, I saw the plants there. And so I started nicknaming him Narco. And it's something that I don't think about because I don't do weed. And so these little events got me to thinking about it. And I know a lot of people like to smoke weed, and a lot of people have questions about Colombia in particular, about what goes on, what's it like. And so this is where this has come from. And I decided last week that I would do this topic. Now, just this morning, I get up usually early, 6, 7 o'clock is late rising for me. Today I got up about just before 7. And I sat down, and like I always do, I'm refreshing my thoughts and doing my outline for Coffee Time Live. And I went on and just did a last minute search, and I saw this article just done by Medellin Guru. And I read the article, and it was funny because I wish I had seen this article a week ago. It would have saved me a lot of research and translations. But the article is out. I always recommend that webpage, MedellinGuru.com. I find his information to be one of the few places that's got pretty realistic, pretty good information. It's not always dead on, but I pointed something out to him one time and he made an immediate correction. So his intention is certainly to be very accurate. And so reading his article actually helped me consolidate my thoughts. So I want to give credit to him in the article. So I got my page here. Okay, first of all, public use and sale in Colombia is illegal. You can go to jail. So you don't really want to do that. Also, it's illegal to carry in public. Now, I know that a lot of people think it's not, and they say, well, small amount. No, if you carry in public, it's illegal. Now, here's what is legal in Colombia. First of all, Colombia has medical marijuana. As a matter of fact, it's becoming a big, big industry, and they're exporting it. I believe it's somewhere around $40 billion. I may not have that right, so don't quote me on that, but it's in the billions. So it's becoming a pretty good cash crop export. One of the reasons for that is for every dollar in North America that's spent to grow medical marijuana, it's under 2 cents cost here in Colombia. So, I mean, it's much more profitable for people in North America to actually buy it from Colombia than it is to even do their own. So we'll see how that goes in the future. But medical marijuana here, unlike most things, you can just walk into a drugstore and just get it. Medical marijuana does require a doctor's prescription. You have to have one. If not, then you could get yourself in trouble, and you certainly won't be able to buy it. The other thing that's legal is private use up to 20 grams, which is less than an ounce. What is it? It's 0.6, 0.7 gram or ounce to 20 grams, something like that. Private use is legal for that small amount. You can also grow up to 20 plants. So my neighbor who's got 2 plants on his balcony, that's perfectly legal, and he can actually add 18 more, except his balcony's not big enough. So how do you reconcile it's illegal to carry in public, but it's legal for your private usage? Well, I'll get to that. There's been some rule changes from prior to 2014, 2015, 2019. There's been a number of rule changes, law changes. Last year, as a matter of fact, the courts ruled that banning drinking in parks or smoking pot in parks, public usage, is actually an unconstitutional law in Colombia. And so for a while, for a short time, you saw you couldn't drink in the park, and now you can drink in the park. That's actually kind of a cultural, historic thing, is to go have a beer in the park with your friends, and so you can do that again. But the police also are able to stop you and search you by law. And if you have weed under the 20 grams, they can confiscate it. They can also fine you up to 200 and just over 200,000 pesos, so $70. They can fine you even though private use is legal, but the public carry is not. Now you say, well, the fine's not that big a deal. Yeah, but it represents kind of a hassle because these things don't go quick, and so you can be tied up for a few hours dealing with something like that. It's just something to think about. Now, over 20 grams, if you're caught selling over 20 grams, you can get up to 30 years. That's the maximum limit. Now, the typical is 1 to 3 years, unless you get like over 1,000 grams. So there's tiers, and there's different provisions, lots of law changes. What you have is a country that has a history of having a lot of issues around drugs. And so the first reaction of the government is to just, we don't want to have anything to do with it. We don't want to represent that it's okay to do. But then you also have a populace, like many places in the world, that says, look, it's pretty harmless, and we're kind of a libertarian society, so get off our back. And so this has been kind of a collision of ideas, and it's been confusing. 15% of the people in jails in Colombia are there for drug-related crimes. So, can you smoke pot legally in Colombia? Yes. You can smoke it in public, except carrying it in public is not legal. You can be fined, it can be confiscated, but you won't have any criminal charges as long as it's under 20 grams. If for some weird reason it just appears in your apartment and it's under 20 grams, even if for some reason the cops don't come into your house, and I've never seen that, but even if for some reason, you know, the cop also materialized in your living room and you've got 20 grams sitting on the table, there's nothing that will be done about that because it's private usage. If he comes in, you've got 20 plants growing on your balcony, or if he sees it from the street, I suppose, you know, he may want to come up and count them, but not very likely. They don't really, in general, the attitude is weed's not that big a deal. The older you are, the more you may tie that to the issues of the past and have more of a resentment. But the younger you are, you just see it as, well, it helps me relax, it helps me to sleep, blah, 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 all the things I always said when people asked me why. So that's what I have to say about weed today. That's taken the right amount of time. I'm going to take a moment to try to read these comments. If you have a question, please put 4 question marks. And it doesn't have to be about today's topic, a question about anything. And when it looks like there's no more questions coming, then we'll just kind of wrap this up for today. If we stop earlier than usual, I don't mind. I don't know if you noticed, but my throat's a little hoarse. It's not from being sick. I go long periods of time without much talking. In the last couple of weeks, I've been talking a lot because I've met up with people, a lot of questions, talk. My throat's not used to it, and so here we are. So let me read, see what we got. Yes, money crop, but they don't do flower yet, only extracts. Okay, ins and outs. I've seen in the 70s when I worked with a smoker at work, he was very paranoid. Yeah, sometimes. Does Colombia offer dual citizenship? Well, no one offers it. I think what you mean is, do they allow it? So can you be a citizen of the United States or citizen of Canada and also become a citizen of Colombia? And the answer is yes. That also holds true for Ecuador. So you can hold 2 passports. There are some advantages. There's actually a couple countries that I wouldn't want to go to, but there's a couple countries you can go to on a Colombian passport that you can't go to in a U.S. or Canadian passport. Don't ask me which ones. I've looked at it a couple years, but feel free to look it up yourself. Like I said, they aren't any place that I want to go. I think there's a reason why Canada and U.S. don't include them on the typical list. But yeah, you can have dual citizenship. Do we have any other questions? There's quite a conversation about weed going on. Oh, by the way, if you're watching this on TV, what you're not seeing is the chat. There's a live chat, and depending on laptop or on your phone, the size of what it is, the screen you're viewing, because you can choose, I think, 3 different kinds. And as long as the 3 type is like a small half half page, and then there's a theater that goes across, but you can see above and below it. And then the fourth one, or the third one, is a full screen. The full screen, you can't see the chat. And if you're watching TV, it's the same way. So if you have it in theater, it's below to the right. And if you have it on half page, it's just to the right. And that's for your laptop or phone. And for TV, you're not seeing the chat. So there's a lot of live chat going on. Most people watch on their phone and laptop. Personally, I watch all my YouTube practically on TV. I mean, why not? But as a matter of fact, for the most part, that's most of my TV. But if you're watching TV and you're wondering what's going on, where I'm answering questions, that's why. One way around it, go ahead and watch it on TV, but have it on your phone, and then you can just look at the chat on your phone. Okay, Charles, always messing with me. I watch it on my smart wristwatch. I don't know. I'm kind of calling BS because it would be so small. How are you going to see it? I didn't mention CBD oil. Is it available? Is it legal? I have no idea. I really don't know. This is a topic I'm not an expert on. I researched for the past week, asked my questions, all of that, and all I did was look for weed. I didn't look for anything else. I have no idea about, the big one, the Coca-Cola product that everybody thinks about Colombia. I have no idea. It's not my world. I really honestly don't care. It's just, like I said, it just kind of, the topic fell in my lap, and I figured I'll cover that because I do get asked quite a bit. The number one thing I think I get asked about is can you get a girlfriend kind of thing. And you don't see me cover that over and over and over again. But I have been asked about marijuana for a long time. And because I don't really have any interest, I just never bothered. But when this chain of events happened, I just figured, okay, it's time I cover it. CBD. I know there's interest. I have the impression that it's available here, it's legal here, but there's not much of a market here. But I don't know if that's real. I've read a few posts here and there on Facebook, people talking about it. The Medellin Facebook group, it's a real big one, but half of the people on there are just kind of nutcases, and you can't really believe much of what you read on there. Although there are some people that over time you learn they're actually a pretty good source of information. But if you just go there and just start reading, beware. There's so much bad information, and a lot of trolls, a lot of really nasty people on that page. It's almost a shame. You've got 20 some thousand, I think, and probably half of them are just jerks looking to ruin somebody's day. But that leaves 10,000 that are really nice and helpful. Please ID the age range constituted your 25 years of usage. Well, actually, I said 15 years. And the age range, oh my God. The first time I smoked pot was in that Volkswagen on the way to Woodstock. I told you about that. How I was so ignorant about it. I brought tobacco because I thought you had to cut it. And they all looked at me, and everybody had a good laugh. And of course, I was embarrassed. And, oh, I was just kidding. But no, because you got a bag of pipe tobacco in your. Okay, so that was the first time. And when I say 15 years, I really don't include that because I didn't smoke here and there little bits. It was when I was in the Marine Corps, and there was a period of time, including after I got out, that amounted to about 15 years, when it was almost a daily thing. Although older weed didn't have the addictive properties that, what I understand, some of the newer types of weed. And so back then, of course, I've never been an addictive personality anyway, but I would, I could just decide to not smoke for a while and days and then start again. I also grew and sold for 2 seasons for extra money. I was out of the Marine Corps at that point and back in university going for my second degree in engineering, and needed money, and it was very illegal. And I grew corn. I had this house in the country, and I grew corn, and I put the weed in between rows of corn. I also used Miracle Grow. And what happened is, towards the end, I actually went away for a couple days, and I came back, and the corn had reached its maximum height, and the weed was about a foot taller. I mean, it was really, really high. It was like a growth spurt over a couple days. It just caught up to the corn and passed it. And so, and so there was a bit of a panic. I got a hold of a friend, help me get these. And there was 200 and some plants, and we're digging them out, putting them in the upstairs of the house that I was staying in, and hanging them upside down and opening all the windows. But you would walk in the first floor of that house, and the hairs on your arm would be sticking together. The resin was so strong throughout the house. 20 feet away from the house, you could smell this stuff. It's like, oh my God, what am I doing? Because this was in New York, and it's very illegal. But such is life. I saw something interesting on race and how Colombians view each other versus USA. Bottom line, they don't notice difference between skin tone. Very different takes on race between two societies. There was a video that you may be talking about. His name is Sly, and he was in the military, and he's here on a military, I think, disability, and he's been in Colombia for maybe going on 2 years, and he's been traveling around to different places. He was going to be in Medellin, decided, I think it was expensive. He went to Cali, thought he was home, and quickly realized all the reasons I don't like Cali. And he loved it at first. He went to Bogota, Bucaramanga. He's traveled to some different places, I think, trying to find a place to settle down. But he just did a video a few days ago about this topic. And it's not that they don't notice the difference. Of course, they know, you can't help but notice the difference. But their attitude about it is, it's not a noticing by placing judgment on it. And one of the things he talked about that people don't usually think to talk about is the usage, like one of his viewers saw another video, negro, and they're thinking negro. Well, in Spanish, negro is black. And here, anything that you're identified with, like if you're skinny, flaquito, flaquita, if you're fat, gordo, I'm gordo or gordito. They're not making judgments, they're not picking on you, but they're descriptive, and it's actually done with affection, especially when they put the, like, negrito, it's with affection, with the ito or ita on the tail end of it, or moreno, or shades of brown, or things like that. They're descriptors that are used by everyone. Blanquito, white. But it's a whole different way of looking at it than you'll have in a country that has a history of, black being inferior and white being superior. Here, there aren't feelings of that in general. Now, you're going to find, people are people, and you're going to find things everywhere. Maybe somebody lost his job to somebody and maybe he'll blame. But personally, I've never seen it. I'm told by some friends here, because this is a topic I've actually had a lot of conversations about, and I'm told by some friends here that, yeah, there's a few people that, have a problem with whites or Chinese or black or whatever, but it's few and far between. And even the people that they know that have issues, they're not burning issues. And I don't mean that as a bad pun. I mean, they're not like, their life is wrapped up in the fact, I don't want to live next to somebody. They just have, or like my mother with Japanese, she was of World War II age, and she hated everybody Asian. Her father was a diplomat to China. She was French. He was a diplomat to China, and he was knifed in the back. And then Japan, World War II, Pearl Harbor, sneak attack. So I grew up with her with all Asians are deceptive and evil and you can't trust them and all the propaganda like World War II. I never bought into that kind of stuff, and she never tried to inflict it on me when I was younger. But here, you don't have that level of animosity, even with people that might have an issue. So it's really a country lacking in prejudices. And I don't say lacking is that they ought to have them. I'm just saying it just doesn't really exist. But again, it depends on where you are. Here in Armenia, this is a melting pot, and nobody cares about whatever you are, wherever you are. Everybody's treated fine. But you can get to a place like Manizales, for example, which I have always said nice things about, and I still do. But you'll see there that it's very cliquish. This has come up recently in a few conversations. It's still a great place, but it's cliquish. And so it's not if you're black or Asian or whatever. If you're not born from Manizales, you're really not part of the good, the cool table, and you're never really going to be part of that cool table. There's always going to be a bit of a separation, and that's one of the two reasons that I'm probably not living in Manizales. It's nothing overt. You can walk the street and everything seems fine, but if you're there for a while, you just kind of, if you've lived in Armenia, then that difference kind of stands out. If you've never lived in Armenia, then you might not even notice it. So there's that. In Ecuador, I did a couple videos about prejudice because Ecuador holds a lot of prejudice. There's a lot of animosity. Sometimes it's between black and white. Sometimes it's always between rich and poor. Coastal versus mountain. City from city. Loja thinks Cuenca is crap, and Cuenca thinks Loja is backwards, and so that in Ecuador they kind of thrive. It's almost, it's a little more insidious, but think of, okay, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, but if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, there's a historic kind of clash there. Browns fans and Bills fans really not the best of, so you have that kind of tension. Well, in Ecuador, you have that Homer mentality, but it comes out in a lot of ways. Like if you're in Cuenca and you're from Loja, and you go for a job, you're only going to get that job if you're the very last one on the list of it, available for that job. So you see a lot more of it in Ecuador. And here in Colombia, it's kind of like the concept of Martin Luther King, content of your character versus color of your skin, the concept of the melting pot that's actually been realized. So I've spoken about it before. In Armenia, it's colorblind in the sense that of any negative form of it. Okay. Where can a gringo learn Spanish in Armenia? Well, go to the store, ride in a taxi. I mean, they speak Spanish here. Now you mean formally. They have language schools here. And one of the best way, there is a big language exchange. One of these days I'll get around to going and doing a video on it. There's not so many gringos. There's maybe a handful, but from what I've seen, I saw a photo. I think there's about 50 people, and you have Colombians that speak English and Colombians that want to speak English, and they get together and do a language exchange, and they welcome if gringos go. For the way I learned, that's probably the best way. But I don't chase it anymore. I know enough to get around, and so every day I learn something new, and that's good enough. I'm more focused on living, and I don't need to go there. Another thing you can do is some of the language schools that are teaching English, you can go there and volunteer because they love to have people help them in conversation. And in return, you can make an exchange and say, look, I'll go and have conversation with your students if you set up, hour and a half a day, twice a week to help me with Spanish. And then you don't have to pay either. So there's lots of ways to do it. Thank you for your help answering my CBD question. It was not a very good answer, and I wouldn't depend on what I had to say. I wouldn't go back and try to find it. Don't worry about it. Do your own research on it because I really don't know. And just because I really don't like to put out any information just on things that I've heard. Whenever I talk to you about a particular topic, I really like to have some authority behind it. And that's why I quiz all my local friends. I go out of my way to find information. I research topics. Sometimes I'll do an hour video and I might have put 20 hours into preparing for it, depending on the topic. CBD is one of those things. Yeah, I've heard, I might be right, but I probably shouldn't even said anything. I just don't know. Let's see. I would look for a beautiful woman. What? Hi, sir. Thank you for all you have done to show my city, Armenia. We're proud of you. Oh, well, thank you. It's a great place. That's why I'm living here. But it's not great for other gringos, and they should not come here. They should go to Manizales. I don't want it to get ruined. Oh, by the way, I don't know because I lost if anybody contributed. I gave a thank you to the contributors at the beginning. If you've contributed today, I really appreciate it. If I missed it, I'm sorry. I have the volume turned down. I'm just making up what Lauren says. That's not a bad way to do it. Although I could certainly find something better to look at. Well, it's a pretty spiffy hat, though. Medellin, not Manizales for gringos. That comment is written by a guy who just arrived in Manizales and is contemplating living there, which, I get your point. Medellin already has certain areas like somewhat rurales, well, not somewhat, rurales, poblado, absolutely, some few other areas that just had so many people. On any given day, they'll have 20,000 foreigners, kind of roaming around, looking for beautiful women and cheap drugs and not all, of course, but a percentage of them, to where there's attitudes. There's, the tipping culture. We've addressed it in so many different ways, where the culture of what Colombia is altered in areas like that. And I won't even say for better or worse, but I'll just say different. And one of the things that I love about living in a place like Ibagué or Armenia or Manizales, where you don't have a ton of people, there's not enough to reach a tipping point to actually change the culture. The culture of Colombia, without being corrupted by those situations, is really a beautiful culture. It's just very friendly, very giving, very helpful. And when you get into those situations, people start to become dollar oriented because a lot of the visitors think money is king and they wave it around and they throw it away. And look, I'm big man because all that cost doesn't mean anything to me. And yeah, I can pay double for the rent. I don't care because I'm big man on campus. And so, you know, if you're a local living in that environment, after a while you say, well, geez, you know, it's an easy way to pick up free money. You know, they just want to throw it away. They don't care about it. I'll take it. And then they start looking for it. And then they start overcharging for it because they figure, well, you're going to do it anyway. So the whole attitude is kind of changed and corrupted by that. And when you live in places like Ibagué or Armenia or Manizales, places that I like, it doesn't have those impacts and that infection going on, and things are more normal. Because always remember, in the Colombian culture, the idea of money is really kind of low class. It's crass. A visitor came recently and pulled out, you know, a wad of money, and he's kind of thumbing through it because we don't think anything of it. And I told him, don't do that. You know, it's, you know, carry a couple 20s maybe. But, you know, for him, it wasn't a large amount. It was just a practical way, and it's not in his wallet. But you go to pay and you're thumbing through. It's low class. Um, you know, flashing money around or acting like that. Where, you know, in the United States, it's normal. You wouldn't give it a thought to pull out your bills and, you know, you don't think anything of it. But that's why here it's hard to get a price on something. You know, it's, if you're a North American and you're buying something, first thing, what's the price? And if it's in a certain price range, then I'll look to see if the product suits me. That's the last thing that you want to do here. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's so hard to get a price out of somebody. But I will remind you that if you are buying something here, whether it's a service or a product, always get the price up front. Doesn't mean you'll necessarily get it on the first question, but always get the price. And if you have any deal that you're making, it needs to be in writing, because once that transaction's done, whatever agreement you had is out the window past the purchase, unless you put it in writing. That's just the norm. Okay, where are we at? I'm rambling here. I would love not having to tip. Well, you know, tipping is pointless. This came up. It comes up all the time. But there was a guy on his high horse on a Facebook page about, well, if you're so cheap you can't afford 30 cents and like that, you know. And the thing is, it's like I responded, which I don't get caught up in a lot of Facebook things, but occasionally I do. And I responded to this saying, you know, first of all, he thought, you know, tipping at this place every day is why they were treating him nice when he came. And I don't tip, and people treat me great. And you know what, he sees it as a result of money, and it's not. As a matter of fact, you can actually be diminished in people's eyes by tipping, depending on where. In Medellin, maybe not so much, but in the Colombian culture. And I wanted to point out to him, okay, so you tip the waitress. First of all, the waitresses don't get the money. It goes to the owner. It's not a tipping culture, and it goes to the owner. Second of all, the waitress is paid the same rate as any other employee. They don't have a system here like in the US. They're paid half as much because it'll be made up in tips. It's not like that here. And so you're tipping the waitress. If you know, if you feel good about that, then why didn't you tip the cook? He actually did all the work. and he's probably making a similar wage as the waitress. So all she did was carry it to you. But, you know, he's back there slaving away in a hot kitchen, burning himself, cooking your dinner that you thought was awesome, but you didn't think to tip him. Or if you go buy a car, you're going to tip the car salesman. You know, it's like, where do you draw this line? Just because it was a waitress, he tipped her. And, you know, I'm pointing out to him, it's your culture that you're putting over this. It has nothing to do with Colombia. You're making yourself feel good, but there's no logic or rationale to it. And the logic and rationale to it ought to be, what is the culture that you're in, and do that. Tips are usually shared by all the staff. Well, it depends. They could be. Tips generally don't occur in most places, although you are seeing more of it. And the reason is there was a situation that came mostly out of Bogota and Medellin, where foreigners were tipping more and more and more. So if you go to Poblado, tipping has become a normal thing, with taxis, everything else. So in some areas, tipping. And what was happening was you had some restaurants that just started, as I mentioned earlier, just started saying, well, I'll just go ahead and do it. So 10%, I'll just add it to the bill. They don't care. They don't notice, so I don't even have to wonder. They were doing that. Well, they passed a law saying you can't just add 10% to a bill. And so in this law, they said you have to ask. If you're going to do that, you have to ask. So that law now has told other places, like here in Armenia, that if you're more of an upscale type restaurant, they're saying it's okay to put 10% on the bill as long as you ask. Well, they're going, well, I never even thought about that. So the 10% goes on the bill, and what do? I say no. All my local friends say no. They ask, I say no, because that's how it is here. But that's where it came from. And you can see how these things kind of grow and affect the culture. But when you put that 10% on, it goes directly to the owner. Do they share it with the staff? You might have some owners that do that. But my understanding is that most don't. In other words, they saw that law and the 10% of tipping essentially as a way to just increase prices without increasing prices. Okay, I'm reading. Hold on. We are told the workers are working for very low wages, so it seems appropriate. Well, you're told wrong. They're working for very low wages. That's kind of a relative term. As compared to what? As compared to the United States? Well, yeah. But then again, their rent is a quarter of what you pay in the United States. So if they're getting paid 25 cents to the dollar in the United States, you see it as a very low wage. But if everybody around them is getting 25 cents to the dollar, and rents are 25 cents to the dollar, and food is 25 cents to the dollar, they're simply living in a different economy. Now, are you telling me that people in the United States, everybody is doing well? Are you telling me that there's not 24% of the population living in poverty? Because that's what the count is in the United States. So do you just tip waitresses, or you tip everybody you think that needs it? And does everybody need it? You know, it's, if you're in a culture that's not tipping, it just kind of takes it away. And think about this. Think about how condescending it is to come to a culture where you don't really understand their situation. You go, oh, those poor little people, they got to have this extra money. I'm going to help them out because they're so poor. You know, I use the example when I lived in Hiron, a friend of mine owned a taxi, but he didn't just own a taxi. He was a professor at the university in Lohan, retired from there, and he had a retirement pension from there. And he got old enough to get his retirement pension from the government. So he had two pensions. While he was a professor, he bought several properties, and those properties he rented out. So now he's got two pensions and rental money coming in from properties. Plus he has a taxi cab. When he works that taxi cab full time, he makes about $4,000 in dollars a month. plus his 2 pensions, plus his rental money. This guy is making more than pretty much every gringo that he picks up in that cab. And we had he speaks English. We had a conversation one time where I hired him to drive me quite some distance to get a camera. The camera that I still use today for my the Canon. And on the way, we talked all the way, and we discussed this, and he was pretty open about what he has going on, and he tells me that when he gets gringos, they say, here, keep this extra 50 cents or whatever, and he says, yeah, I keep it. They don't care about it, but he finds it to be so condescending because he knows that he could buy and sell most of these people that are in his taxi, and in Cuenca. The going pay for most taxi drivers is about $4,000 a month. So, in my neighborhood, there were a couple taxi drivers, and where I lived was very, very upscale. I was the only gringo that lived in this beautiful community. It was all houses and very nice. There were new cars in most of the driveways. So, I mean, but people would still come to Cuenca and say, well, I got to tip this poor taxi driver. I mean, it's such a condescension to make these assumptions. And some, yeah, I'll take the money, but I mean, stop trying to judge another country by where you come from, because there's no comparison. There's no way to compare. The economy in Colombia is simply different. And the number, as I covered this a week or two ago, the percentage of poverty in Colombia is not much different than in the United States. Yeah, there's plenty of poor here. It's like it doesn't go up to 30%, but there's quite a few. And there's around 8% that are extreme poverty. But the middle class is by far the largest group, by far, in Colombia. Okay, tipping for haircuts is particularly hard for many Americans to let go of the tipping psychology, but if you're living in a place, it's always best to go local. I don't tip for haircuts. And if I were in Poblado, then they would probably expect it. But watch what locals do. And if you make local friends, ask them what they do. And if you live in Medellin or if you live in Bogota, you do have a newer set of standards, a newer set of rules. But if you live in the rest of Colombia, it doesn't really operate the way you think it does. And so, feel free to ask people questions. The downside of tipping that people don't even realize is instead of becoming a person, you become a dollar sign. And I don't want to be treated that way. The condescension that goes with it, the picture of you respect drops down. I'll tell one more story. And I know you're probably watching, but it's a good story. There was a guy that was visiting here, and he was in the hotel. He needed inserts for his shoes. So he went out and bought these inserts, but he had to cut them to fit. He didn't have anything. So he asked at the front desk. They said, well, check with the seamstress. She works there. She sews up things and does the laundry and whatever. So he goes back and she pulls out these big heavy duty scissors. Great, perfect. So she cut them for him. So she cut it up. He offered her 10 or 20,000 pesos as a thank you. And she's like, no, 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 no. And he's, trying to, yeah. And she's like, no, 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 no. And she viewed him differently from that point on. And what I tried to explain to him, and actually he understood, was that she did something from her heart. She did something for him. And by trying to pay her, he took that away from her, that good feeling. When you do something good, when you're adding to the positive side of your karma, and somebody comes along and now they want to pay you for it, you've just diminished it. You've just taken that away. You've removed something from her. And she didn't want to give that up for the sake of 10 or 20, whatever. She didn't want to give that up because she's not used to that. She doesn't see it the way we see it because she's living in her culture. And the level of respect that she would view him in would be altered. He did not respect the value of what she was trying to give him, and he tried to turn it into a dollar sign, into something cold. And this is the kind of thing that you can do inadvertently. And most people are not going to come out and say, "What do you really think I need your, 30 cents? Do you want to insult me?" They're not a culture that it will get in your face like that. But many people will have those thoughts. Okay, yeah, I'll take your tip, Mr. ATM, because that's how I'm going to see you from now on. You see yourself as only being about money. That's how I'm going to see you. In Armenia, it's hard to get out of a taxi without getting the exact change back because they don't want to feel that they're, taking advantage of you in any way. And they'll hold. One time it was like, it wasn't even a penny in equivalent. And he called me back. I was in a hurry, and he called me back, and I thought, "What? Something's wrong. I left something." And he gives me my change back. It wasn't even an attempt to tip. It was just, it had no value to me. What was it, like a 50 peso? Maybe it was a 100 peso coin. And a 100 peso, what's that, a third of a penny or something? I mean, get moving was more important to me. But even in that case, no, 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 no. Come get your change. Okay. So we're tipping. Uh, Sometimes overdrawn. No, all the time my stories are overdrawn. Okay, didn't exactly pose it as a question, but toilet paper, I'm going to answer it as a question anyway because it comes up. In South America, there's a cultural habit and a history of you don't put toilet paper in the toilet. You put it in a trash can, which kind of, but um, my toilet paper goes in the toilet. And if people come here, I don't want to have toilet paper in my trash can. So I tell them put it in the toilet if they're going to go use the bathroom. The plumbing, newer plumbing, is not a problem. In some of the older places with the older plumbing, particularly if you get in an area that's got, housing from 300 years ago, 400 years ago, it can definitely be problematic. So there's a reason for it, except it carries on as though that's the way it ought to be, even with regular modern plumbing. Uh, I suppose there's some places, in the South, maybe. I don't know around here. I'm seeing any buildings old enough, but in Armenia, there might be some places, but you would probably find that most people that are living, particularly on the south side of the city, have that habit. That's why I tell them, don't worry about it. Um, so, I mean, if you're staying in a hotel and it looks like it's like pre-World War I, then you might want to pay attention to that because you don't want to be the guy that causes, you know, a line of plumbers at the door and be your fault. But other than that, if it's just a normal modern place, don't worry about it. Okay, looks like no more questions. My voice made it. We're resting it today. I might even have a cup of tea. Oh, I'm back to my normal coffee. Picked up a bag the other day. Oh, I'm so happy. All right, where are we at? Oh, right on time. And there's no more questions. So anybody that contributed, I thank you very much. To all you viewers that hung in there with me, I appreciate it. I know I kind of dragged these stories out, but I guess I'll see you next Sunday. Ciao.